Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com, where music comes to life. My guest today is making his second appearance on the site. His band, Pattern Seeking Animals, is about to release what I think is really one of the best records of the year so far. It's called Only Passing Through. I'm happy to have him here again to talk about it. Please welcome songwriter and keyboardist John Bogehold. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And we last spoke 2 years ago, almost to the day, as the band was getting ready to release its second record, Prehensile
Right.
Tales.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, you had mentioned that you already had a third record pretty much written. Now, the world fell apart since then. We were
Yeah.
all locked down. Is the record we're hearing now what you had in mind 2 years ago?
Kind of, because at that point I had written most of the material that I thought was going to be the album. I don't believe we had recorded any of the drum tracks yet, so it was still in demo form.
Mhm.
And by demo form, that's the actual songs, but we build them up as we go.
Yeah.
Um, and so what happened was when the pandemic hit, obviously there's a lot of things just scheduling that got really tricky. So it took us a little while longer to be able to get into the studio and record drums, get people, get everything
Mhm.
done. A lot of technical issues getting people together, or not together, but at least getting tracks together and writing and all sorts, the usual stuff which you hear from probably most
Yeah.
musicians. So in the time, it gave us a little more time so I wrote a few more songs and refined some of the sounds and a couple more influences in there. I mean, a lot of the songs are the same, but there was a few more added. Maybe it changed some of the influences and textures and things like that as it went by, just because I had more time to mess around and experiment with stuff.
And lyrically, I think if there's a theme to the record at all, it feels sort of like mortality and the passing of time,
Yeah.
but not in a morbid sense, sort of in a seize the day kind of sense. Was that influenced by the pandemic, or were you already kind of working that?
No, it really wasn't. I made a conscious effort to not put anything that was influenced by COVID and the pandemic, because I just figured, you know what, everybody, there's going to be millions and
Yeah.
millions of musicians writing, and I'm not interested in listening to any of their stories. So, and it's nothing personal, but I just don't care. So what? Oh yeah, you were stuck in your house for a few months. Woo. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell me something, that wasn't happening to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm just not interested in hearing that stuff. So I made it a point not to write about that. But in the Patterson Animals from the beginning, I always am fascinated with mortality
Mhm.
and death. And again, not in a morbid way, like you said,
Yeah.
but just because it's a part of life, and there's so many mysteries about it. Like in Prehensile Tales, uh, that whole epic lifeboat was about
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
about. So I tend to gravitate toward that topic because it's fascinating to me.
Mhm. Yeah, and like we said, it's not a morbid record in any sense. If anything, it's more of an empowering that time is moving on, take advantage of it kind of thing, which really struck me.
Yeah, and I think the title "Only Passing Through," which I
Mhm.
liked. I originally had a bunch of song titles, and
Mhm.
it came down to uh, "The Only Passing Through" is one of the songs on the album, obviously. And look at some of the lyrics. Said the stranger, and then time has a way. There's
Mhm.
elements of that only passing through,
Yeah.
whether it's a stranger passing on the road,
Mhm.
or a in a western, a guy passing through an old western
Mhm.
town, like you hear in the old movies, only passing through,
Yeah.
ma'am. And you can use it in a metaphysical sense, whether Hinduism or all the reincarnation
Mhm.
elements of religions and things. So there's lots of interesting angles to mine from that whole concept.
Yeah. And it's been amazing listening to the evolution of this band in such a compressed amount of time. The first record only came out in 2019, and it
Right.
was really good. But I don't think anyone would have been surprised if it were a Spock's Beard record as opposed to a Pattern Seeking Animals record. With the second record, you evolved a little beyond that and put out an amazing record and began to establish your own identity. But with this record, with only passing through, it's clearly a pattern seeking animals record. And now that there's been some time and space between the last Foxbeard record and you have three out, are you guys finally looking at this as, yeah, this is our band, this is what we're doing, and it's new and it's different?
Well,
Mm,
see, you'd have to ask the other guys on that. I believe they are because that's where the focus is at this point.
mhm,
To me, this not necessarily pattern seeking analyst, but I've always been doing my my own thing. And it's funny because someone asked me the same thing: is this a side project of
mhm.
Spock's Beard? And I said, well, no, Spock's Beard is kind of like a side project to me.
Yeah.
One thing I was, because I wasn't in the band,
Yeah.
it was something I did on the side as to all my other stuff, and I loved doing it and turned in a lot of working a lot of music with them. But this is my main
Mhm.
vehicle. This is it. The other guys right now we're getting set up to play live, and they're all gung ho about it. And Spock's, I just don't know. I don't. They had some things scheduled. I don't know, like February,
Mhm.
maybe right around now that were canceled because of the pandemic in Great Britain and one festival, but they had to cancel it for the same reason a lot of people have to cancel things. So this is to me, this is the band. This is it.
Mhm.
And as far as the evolution from the beginning, the first album, because it wasn't meant to be a band in the beginning, it was a collection of songs. A couple were left over I had written for Spock's, and then there was some new stuff which I redid. And then when the record company was interested, I decided to okay, we're going to make this an album. Uh, and so I'm happy with the way it turned out, but
Mhm.
wouldn't have necessarily been, if I'd started to be a group in an album, I would have been a little more conscious about
Mhm.
the overall group sound. I'm totally happy with the way it turned out, so that's not the issue at all. But then with Prehensile Tales, it was like, okay, here we are at the starting point. And this is I have a certain sound in mind, and I'm going to
Mhm.
shoot for it. Uh, so you're right. I think, yeah, this to not not necessarily intended to make it our own identity and not like Spock's, but there's just certain things in my mind that I wanted it to sound like.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, well, along those lines, the record has some really unique instrumentations and arrangements to it. Now,
yeah.
were you able to bring in like string sections and different instruments, or was it you guys handling all of that?
Well, uh, while I was first of all, there's no string sections on this
Mm,
album. There's a violinist,
mm,
same one, Rinny, who we used her on Prehensile Tales. I love her
mm,
sound. It was all done remotely because she lives in New York, but
mm,
again, most of the album was. Um, the other instruments, the trumpet, same trumpet player from Prehensile Tales, John
mm,
Fumo, and he lives locally here in L.A. So we just got together at Rich's and recorded all his parts on Time Has a Way. Aside from that, the other oddball instruments are ones that I played. I started during the pandemic. I started listening to a lot of Latin American, like folk and pop and reggaeton and all that kind of. I just really got into it, and I always wanted a charango, which is
mm,
that little,
mm,
10 string. It's kind of like a mandolin with nylon strings and five courses. So I found one of those online. I got that, then a Ron Rocco and a Wehala, just some odd instruments, and I started laying them into the tracks. And I thought, well, this is a cool texture that you don't
mm,
necessarily hear. I'd already been playing mandolin on tracks in the on the other
mm,
stuff, but it gave a kind of a different vibe,
mm.
which I think turned out real well.
And I love that the songs have a variety of what's traditionally considered prog. Sometimes it feels like so many bands get trapped in that, okay, we need an epic, that
Yeah,
they lose the song.
yeah,
And you guys travel so comfortably between, there's the 13-minute song, but then there's the 3-minute song, and
yeah,
five or six. And you sort of shatter that illusion of, every prog record needs to be, one long 45-minute
yeah,
track.
yeah. I think that actually can be a trap
Yeah.
because I understand it when you start working with prog music, and I've been a prog fan for 50
Mm,
years or whatever, so I know the ins and outs of it. And I think when you're a band doing that kind of stuff, you think, okay, you're right, we got to have an epic, we got to have a
yeah.
20 25
Mm,
minute song, and we got to have a double album or whatever. But my background and my really love is also in pop music,
mm,
so a song, no matter how long it is, has to flow, and there can't be any dead spots, and there
Mm.
can't be any filler. And I think the problem a lot of prog acts get into, from my
Mhm.
viewpoint anyway, is that they say, okay, we're going to write an epic that's going to be 25 minutes long, and you get up to 25 minutes long, and anyone actually listening to it would say, yeah, it's 25 minutes long, but there's this whole section which you could easily take out, which really means it's not interesting to the song, and it could, you could take 10 minutes out of the song immediately
Yeah.
and make it better. And I think a lot of people think, it's what that'll the sunk cost fallacy, where it's like throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I've already spent all this time writing that 10-minute section. I don't want to get rid of it because I already invested 2 weeks writing it and recording it. But I think you have to learn that as a writer and a producer. You have to be able to just be ruthless and cut stuff out, because if you don't, people are going to listen to it and think, well, that's gonna nothing.
Yeah.
Or
After
whatever.
one listen, it's done.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I think uh I think it's just learning as you go. And luckily, I've been fortunate so that I never have writer's block, and I can just write continually. So it's not a question of having to wait for influence, or having to wait for a reason to do something. I just write. I get up every day and I write stuff, or do something, because I just love it so much. So it's easy for me to say, this song isn't working. It's, to the trash bin. It's because it's okay. I'll write something else. It's fine.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned sort of the pop influence and pop leaning that you bring to the songs. And one track in particular that I want to talk about, it's a bonus track, but to me, I think
Uh-huh.
it sums the band up perfectly, and that's Just Another Day at the Beach.
Right.
And I say that because the influences of that song, at least in my ears, are completely outside of prog. I mean, it's Spike
Yeah.
era Elvis Costello, it's
Yeah.
Squeeze, it's ecstasy.
Yeah.
And it's showing that, a good pop song is a good pop song, regardless of what you put around it. And I think that's what separates you guys from a lot of bands, is that pop sensibility and those other influences.
Oh yeah. It's Just Another Day at the Beach is a song I've had around for a few years. I wrote it with a friend of mine who
Mhm.
I have written with for 30 years, and
Mhm.
mostly country and country flavored pop. And that song started out to be a country thing, but we thought, well, it's just turning in more of like a Beatley kind of whatever. And it was sitting around for a couple of years, and I, I, I just wanted to try it, just producing as much of a straight ahead pop but interesting song as I could,
Mhm.
because I love pop so much. It's like when I'm writing for an album, to me, it's like if it's good, it belongs on the album.
Mhm.
It's, I think with, like when I was writing for Spock's, I would write something and think they're never going to do this, or I put,
Mhm.
kind of blinders on myself. It's like, okay, I can't write stuff like this because this guy won't want to do this and this guy won't want to
Mhm.
play this. With me, it's just whatever. If it sounds good, it is good.
Mhm.
And the calculation on that song is whether to put it on the main album or not,
Yeah.
because say we had to come up with at least one bonus song, and I was trying to keep the album maximum around 50-52 minutes, because I just get tired of long
Mhm.
albums. With it just drives me crazy these days. I don't have the patience to listen to them. I went back and forth with putting that one in the main album, but then I thought, you know what, I'll just put it on the bonus, and it's still a good song, and it's still there, and you know it'll work.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who would always say that, pop is short for popular, and you want your music to be popular. So what's wrong with a pop song? And I think
Well,
you guys prove that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good music. And the other thing with pop, it's funny with prog, there's kind of a love hate with pop music.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of prog guys will just turn up their nose at
Yeah.
anything remotely pop. But if you go back and listen to uh, interviews with Yes or Genesis or all the
Mhm.
classic groups back then, they would say, well, yeah, we all love pop music. We just wanted to expand on it and make it
Mhm.
so it's something different happening. You listen to uh, I remember reading an interview with John Anderson. He goes, "Yeah, I was listening to Crosby, Stills, Nash and the Fifth
Mhm.
Dimension, and it's stuff." Uh, so, and that's the thing. And I think what happens with a lot of prog music is because people writing it in groups, they only listen to prog, so it becomes a bit kind of inbred. It starts to sound very similar.
Mhm.
It may sound great. I mean, it may, some of the greatest stuff I've heard has been really derivative of my, old Gentle Giant or Yes, or I love that kind of stuff. But to really advance a lot of times, I think you need more influences um, going into the creative hopper.
Yeah. And when it comes to the band itself, I mean, I think outside of Sons of Apollo, you're not going to find a better rhythm section than Dave Maros and Jimmy Keegan. I
I
mean,
agree.
it's
Yeah.
steady as it comes, and
Oh yeah.
your writing and playing is better than ever. But listening to this record, Ted Leonard's performance knocked me out.
Yeah.
Vocally, his writing on some of it and his guitar work,
Yeah.
it just is a giant step forward from even the high level he was at before that. What was your take on Ted's performance on this
Yeah.
record?
See, I've always loved Ted as a guitar player.
Mhm.
And when I would see him in Enchant, and then when he was a Spox later, there was always another guitar player. There was
Yeah,
always the main guy,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
And so Ted would occasionally play something in the back, and I would think, wow, he's really good. And then I would hear him play other stuff and think, wow, he's great because he has a melodic style which I
Mhm.
really love. He's a great soloist. He comes up with great parts and sounds. So that was one of my main things when forming the band is I wanted him to be both the lead singer
Mhm.
and the guitar player, which he was happy with because again, he's always been behind. He's been the
Yeah,
second guitar
yeah,
player in the band, but with other great guitar
yeah,
players. That's the thing. It wasn't like, there wasn't a reason for it
yeah.
at the time. But yeah, he gets better and better each album.
Mm.
And I just let him, you give him parts or give him structure and say, okay, play something cool here or play a solo here. And every solo, I've never had to go back to him and say, this one didn't really work. It's just always the perfect solo. It's always right. So I'm really happy with that because that's hard to find.
Yeah, and it's funny because I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think you just did. Is he's always the second guitar player, so you never realized how
Yeah.
good he was until now he's the only one. So
Oh
I
yeah,
thought,
absolutely.
that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
Yeah.
And when we spoke last time, and we talked a little bit about it now, the pandemic then was just starting, and the hope was sooner or later you guys be able to hit the road.
Yeah.
That wasn't able to happen.
Yeah.
Do you have anything planned
Oh
coming
yeah.
up? You're going to take some steps to play live?
Yeah. We when the pandemic hit, we were going to be playing at Rozfest in
Mm.
Sarasota, Florida, but that was canceled. So now we're booked for Rozfest this year on
Mm.
April 17th, and then Cruise to the Edge.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we're booked on that. I'm not in the live band though. I'm
Oh.
because for a couple reasons. One is that I've never been a real fan of playing live myself,
Mhm.
and also I'm just not as good of a player as the other guys. I have trouble playing a lot of the stuff that I've written. Um, I think I just look at it like I play enough guitar and keyboards to write with, and then I can make it sound good in
Mhm.
Cubase or whatever. But it's just not really my thing. So we have a couple guys in addition to Jimmy, Dave, and Ted, just two fantastic players who are in the band. So it's gonna be pretty cool.
Great. Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
We've been spending some time here with John Bogehold of Pattern Seeking Animals. The record is called Only Passing Through. It's fantastic. It is out everywhere on April 1st. And hopefully, we'll get to see the other guys on the road
Oh yeah.
coming up.
Yep.
John, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Great band, great record, and
Thanks.
best of luck with it.
Absolutely. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Later.